Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the host of the Overnight Shift in WFAN and the king of sports radio rants. Please welcome Sal Licata to the program. Sal, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Thanks for having me, John. Pretty good. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for being here. How did you become so well known for your rants?
I don't even know that I am so well known. Look, I just do and I appreciate the kind words, I just do a talk show that is true to myself. I'm not trying to, and I don't even love, I mean, I know what you're saying, and like a lot of times they'll post the clips and say, oh, rant alert, and I guess technically it is a rant. I honestly don't even love a lot of that stuff. It's just they happen to catch me during a show and people like it, I guess, but I'm not doing that on purpose. It just comes out during the course of a talk show. A caller gets you mad or a topic gets you fired up, and it kind of just happens. So I think the thing that I do on a consistent basis that leads to those rants or explosions or whatever is just a passionate sports talk show. I love what I do. I love New York sports. So when you bring that passion, sometimes you get a little fired up, and that leads to the rant eventually.
Who's the angriest caller you've ever had on the fan?
The caller being angry?
Correct.
I don't know if I could pick out just one, especially by name. You know, remember, you're taking a lot of different calls every single night. But the ones that bother me are the ones that either A, don't understand the point that I'm trying to make, or B, and maybe more specifically B, come at me with some sort of disrespect or try to antagonize me. And just, if you're disrespectful to me, that is that right there is the lightning sign that I need to get me going. They'll come on and immediately, like, with the call, yeah, Sal, I don't like the way you're doing this, and now I'm already triggered. And then we start getting into the conversation. I'll try to convince them of my argument and have them understand and comprehend what I'm talking about, and then they don't get it, they're not listening, and that just infuriates me. So I don't know if I could pick one out. And there's so many calls, and some very good ones, even some guys that I yell at are guys that call regularly, and I still, have a working relationship with. I like when they call up the show and we could yell at each other a little bit, but I don't have one in particular.
How about your best roast to a caller? The best way you roasted a caller who called in. You came back at him and got him.
Another tough one. I don't know if I could just pick one. I forget what it was over, but there was, maybe it was something with Dan Quinn, let's say, the former Falcons head coach, who was rumored to be getting a Giants job. I think, people were calling and saying, oh, why don't you like him? And why don't you like Dan Quinn? And I would have facts why I don't like him. He blew a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. He shouldn't have got the job to begin with. He took over a ready-made team. And just the way that I would tell the callers, like, okay, and now with the final fact, now I'm going to bury you. So I just think it happens. I don't know if I've necessarily roasted a caller before, but obviously in the course of a debate, I feel strongly about my side, and generally I back it up with facts, not just opinion. Those would be situations where sometimes a caller who hasn't done this for a living for almost 20 years, maybe they wouldn't be as prepared in that situation. So anytime like that, that one comes to mind that I remember saying before I buried him on the air, saying, okay, well, now I'm going to bury you with this final point.
Sal Licata here on Sports Talk Chicago. Sal, what are the Giants going to do at quarterback?
I think it's going to be Daniel Jones for now. I mean, it doesn't seem... And look, maybe they draft somebody. I would like to see that. I don't love Daniel Jones, but I think this particular year, with the thought of not having many top quarterbacks available in the draft, doesn't mean there isn't one or won't be one that's going to be any good, but not that surefire or those surefire type guys. As a matter of fact, it probably means that there are going to be guys that will have success, because usually it doesn't matter if you think they're surefire guys or not. You never know with the NFL draft of these quarterbacks. But it doesn't seem like there's a clear-cut option for the Giants. So I think Daniel Jones, for now, is going to get the opportunity to maybe showcase what he can be to a new regime with a new head coach in Brian Daboll, new general manager in Joe Schoen. They've already added a couple of pieces trying to rebuild that offensive line in front of them. I know that was a big talking point. And don't get me wrong, the offensive line was bad, but Daniel Jones in general, he has been bad himself. So I think you could have seen signs in him that you would say, you know what, I think he's got it, but if he could just get help from an offensive line, I don't think that's the case, but I do think the Giants are going to give him one more chance. More so, maybe at a default that they really don't have a better option, and they're screwed salary cap wise, so they can't go out there and bring in a quarterback. There was talk that they might bring in Mitch Trubisky to kind of push Daniel Jones. He obviously went to the Steelers, but I think right now it's a clear cut Daniel Jones, his job this coming season, and probably not beyond that, barring some kind of renaissance from Daniel Jones.
Were you expecting this out of him when the Giants drafted him? Were you high on that draft pick at first?
No, I wasn't. I don't know anybody in New York that was taking, a kid out of Duke with the sixth overall pick or whatever it was that they took him. They ended up, taking him higher than most Giant fans expected. And I know a lot of people like Dwayne Haskins. I could tell you that I didn't want Dwayne Haskins. That was for sure. I just didn't like what I saw from him out of Ohio State. But I didn't love the pick of Daniel Jones. More than that, though, was how they built the team kind of backwards, taking a running back, number two with Saquon Barkley before that, not really building the offensive line, and then Dave Gettleman salivating over the idea of Daniel Jones. Now, I watched Daniel Jones when he first got to the Giants in preseason, and I was impressed. I thought he looked like, okay, he looks a little more polished than your traditional rookie. He did have a successful year one, by a lot of accounts, a successful year one, and then it was just complete regression. And in year four, if you're making the same mistakes that you were in year one, that's a problem. Now, by the Giants' own admission, they didn't put him in a position to succeed with different head coaches, different schemes, different coordinators, bad offensive line, lack of good weapons around him, whatever. So I think there were other circumstances too, but just Daniel Jones, the player, the thing I don't love about him, the turnovers, the injury prone nature of his game, and just not really, he doesn't have any touch or feel for the position. So I think there are some good things. He has a big arm and he stands tall in the pocket and he could run a little bit, but all the negatives to me outweigh that. So I was never thrilled about the Daniel Jones pick. I did like him the first season and the preseason as well, or as early as the preseason. But after watching him, Daniel Jones, to me, he's like Ryan Tannehill, and I don't think Ryan Tannehill's any good.
How do you think he compares to Justin Fields here in Chicago?
I mean, I like Justin Fields. I like the upside. I don't watch him as much as I've watched Daniel Jones for 4 years, but I like Justin Fields, and I liked his guts, which, him in the playoffs in Ohio State before he got drafted. Look, it's different. I think we need to see a little bit more of Fields, right? And his ability to stay healthy and his ability to make plays. I liked Fields. I didn't love Justin Fields, though. And I don't know what it is. It's hard to, judge sometimes these quarterbacks coming out of college. He had a good college career, Fields, and he has some of the tools that you would look at. And maybe Fields a good comparison to a guy like Jalen Hurts, let's say. And I like Jalen Hurts in Philly, but there are issues there too, and people don't necessarily love Jalen Hurts, and Philadelphia may still be looking to find, their franchise quarterback. So I like Fields. Put it this way, if you're asking me if I'd rather have Fields or Daniel Jones, yeah, I'd rather have Justin Fields right now because I think the potential or the upside is still there, where I think Daniel Jones has showed his ceiling as a quarterback in the NFL.
Do you have any faith that Jones will turn it around this year with a new head coach and new GM?
No. I don't, but it is possible. I mean, just because I don't have any faith in him, I think it is possible. Another new system. Jones has shown that he could have some success in the league in year one. Like I said, a lot of turnovers, but still made some plays. I think he might be better than what we've seen the last 2-3 years, but I still don't think it's something that I would trust moving forward. Too injury prone and too many mistakes, even if it's not just fumbling the football, which he kind of fixed from his first year. He got a little bit better with that, but making too many mistakes in big spots, forcing the issue, like I said, not knowing when the rush is coming, when the pressure is coming, not having that feel, not having a touch on the football. Everything is 100 miles an hour down the field, hard, fast. And he's got a big arm and he uses it, but there are sometimes you want to have some touch, put some air under the football, and I don't think Jones does that well enough. So just me personally evaluating him as a quarterback, I've seen enough to where I wouldn't trust it moving forward. Could he have an aberration of a good year, or just could he have a year that may show you that he's still got something left? Sure, but then what is the Giants? Then what are you gonna do now? Okay, off of 1 year, you're gonna forget the last 3 and decide that he's gonna be your guy moving forward. I think that could get you in trouble. So I would look to go in a different direction as soon as they could with the salary capped, or assuming that with the draft they find a player that they like.
What about the new regime? How do you evaluate Dable and the new GM coming in?
I like what Joe Shane's done so far. I mean, he's got limited options. The number one thing he said is they're going to try to be competitive at the same time as clear up that salary cap mess. So with the salary cap mess, what are you supposed to do? And they're trying to figure out a way to create some money. They, like I said yesterday, they signed 2 offensive linemen, not huge signings, but for them, anything to try to repair the offensive line is going to be important. And there are still plenty of moves to be made. We know they have a lot of draft picks, so that's going to be of high importance. But I think when you look at the Giants, they're not going to be a team that's going out there and trying to compete for a wild card spot this particular year. So Joe Shane has taken over a mess. It's very early on in the regime. We're going through right now, the free agency period, trying to clear the salary cap space, seeing how he could build a little bit of a team before the draft and then the draft. And with Dable, we don't know yet. I like the opening press conference. I like things that I've heard from him. But what does that mean? I've liked that before from other guys. I love Joe Judge opening press conference. So we'll see what Dable and Joe Shane can do here. But I do get the feeling that the Giants are finally headed in the right direction, that there's some stability with the organization. These were good hires. I wouldn't have hired Dable to be my head coach necessarily. I understand. I think there were so many great options out there. So I wouldn't have gone with Dable, but I understand why they did. And the familiarity with Joe Shane and Brian Dable, I think that's going to be a bonus for this team. And I finally think the Giants now have a tandem that will be here, win or lose. They'll be here for the next at least 4 seasons, and then you evaluate from there how it worked out. But I think they're in good hands with Shane and Dable.
Who would you have preferred and head coach?
Well, I mean, Jim Harbaugh would have been the number one guy for me. You're talking about guys with, great. Harbaugh to me was the best of the bunch. A big name, good pedigree. Josh McDaniels, one of my favorites out there. I've always said getting a second opportunity, he was going to be great wherever he ends up. Obviously, he ends up with the Raiders now. He would have been another guy. I mean, I wouldn't have been opposed to Doug Peterson, who won a Super Bowl. I thought it was important to hire an established head coach for the Giants. They've gone, they went with the unknown with Joe Judge. They went with the retread with Pat Shurmur, and it didn't work out. They went with their own assistant with Ben McAdoofus, and he didn't work out. So they had, to me, Harbaugh would have been the home run for any team, and it turns out nobody signed him. So that would have been the home run for me. But I mentioned the other guys, McDaniels. Oh, I love Brian Flores too. I mean, this was before, obviously, the lawsuit and all that happened. I thought Flores, even afterward, I thought Flores was but obviously afterward, you knew that there was no way that they were going to hire him. So I thought Flores was a top candidate, a guy that I would have looked for. So there were some other guys that I liked before Brian Dable, but I understand why Dable ended up getting the job.
Sal Licata here on Sports Talk Chicago. Sal, are the Mets World Series bound this year?
I'm not going to make that prediction, but I do think they are legitimate World Series contenders. I think the Mets are a little thin. You look at their lineup, they could use another outfielder. They could use they don't need another infielder, but I would like somebody that could play a little outfield and third base, but like a legitimate outfielder. Right now, that guy would be Jeff McNeil. He's okay in the outfield, but he's not a true outfielder. And I can live with it, I guess, but I still think they need one more bat, probably from the outfield. So I think they're a little thin in the lineup, but I do like this team. I love the manager. I think he's going to tidy things up, get guys to be a little more buttoned up and help them get better in New York, Francisco Lindor in particular. So I think you'll see some improvements from Lindor, maybe a guy like James McCann as well. They have the advantage now of a DH, so that should help their lineup. It's just a matter of who's going to be the DH. I still don't think they're done making moves. But you look at their pitching, DeGrom, Scherzer, and now Chris Bassett from the A's. Find me a better top 3 in Major League Baseball with the rotation. I don't love the bullpen, but I think it'll be fine. And a bullpen is always something that you could build in season, year to year, with the fickle nature of bullpens. You never know what you're getting anyway. But with those top 3 in the rotation, how could you not be contenders? Their offense is at least decent enough, and their starting pitching is as dominant on paper as you can have. So yeah, I think they are legitimate World Series contenders. Now, they have some work to do. They have to beat the Braves, and until proven otherwise, Atlanta's the champs, not just the World Series champs, but clearly in the National League East, the Mets have work to do there. Then you look at the Dodgers and what they've done in the postseason and all the other challenges that are going to come about throughout the course of this year. So the Mets have to prove themselves, but obviously on paper going in, they're a team that could easily, maybe not easily, maybe that's pushing, but they're a team that you could see contending for a World Series.
No, you were adamant about Buck Showalter being hired. Why were you so emphatic about getting him for the Mets?
Well, because he's a real manager. So, I mean, going through, and I like Luis Rojas, and I do think he could be a good manager one day, but after Mickey Callaway, who was the furthest thing from a real manager, and watching Luis Rojas, who was an inexperienced, I hate to even say manager. In today's day and age, I use the term data applicator for a lot of these guys. Well, Buck Showalter is a real manager, a proven manager. You're not talking about a guy who's getting a second opportunity, but getting another opportunity, a final opportunity, coming back to New York, on the other side of town, but has unfinished business as he left the Yankees, after getting fired in 1995, and they go on and have a dynasty. That could have been Buck Showalter, and he's built up other teams, whether it be the Diamondbacks or the Rangers or the Orioles, and he's gotten close, he's gotten to the playoffs, but he's never gotten over the hump. I feel like it's the perfect storm where the franchise is ready, Steve Cohen takes over, they're spending money, they're putting the pieces in place, and they needed a real manager who knows what he's doing here in the dugout, and they have that with Showalter, the best one available, and now you have an advantage basically every single night in the dugout with Buck Showalter. You don't have to worry about that part of the ball game at all with him. And I just think it eliminates a concern and gets a guy who himself, there's one thing left for him to do. That is win a World Series. So everybody's on the same page, same goal. This is not a rebuilding job. This is not let's change the face of the team and hire a veteran. No, this is hey, you need a World Series, we need a World Series, and it's the perfect marriage to me in New York to boot after getting fired from the Yankees way back in 1995. So I love Buck Showalter. Obviously, the guy's just a great manager. His baseball mind, all that he's done, I think and this will be the best opportunity that he's had taking over a team that is ready-made. This is not, 3 years, I'm going to build them into winners. So it'll also be a challenge, and, we're going to see if there's a difference with Buck. Generally, he's great at building a team up and making them playoff contenders, but now taking over a World Series contender, how's that going to go? I think it's going to work out well for Buck and the Mets.
Who wins more games this year, the Yankees or the Mets?
Now remember, the Yankees aren't done making moves.
Right.
I hate saying the Mets just because, first of all, I grew up a Met fan, so it sounds maybe a little biased there. The Yankees in a bad year win 92 games. The Mets generally, for everything to go right, win about 92 games. So I always would lean Yankees because they've done it, but I do think the Mets right now are a better ball club, especially right now as we tape this where, the Yankees still don't have a first baseman. I'm not so sure they're going to end up with Freddie Freeman. If they bring Anthony Rizzo back, is that really an upgrade? I think it's an upgrade over Luke Voigt, but is it really an upgrade from what we saw last year? And I like the trade the Yankees just made, getting rid of Gary Sanchez, bringing in a defensive catcher and a defensive shortstop, changing the culture of that clubhouse with Josh Donaldson, bringing in a guy with some edge. But I still think the Mets, with DeGrom, Scherzer, Bassett, hard to believe the Mets would not be a better team. But, we've seen crazier things happen. So I think it'll be close, but I'll probably side with the Mets by a game or two, let's say.
Sal Licata still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Sal, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, your career. How'd you start?
Well, I got an internship out of a broadcasting school at WFAN back in 2003, and that was basically it. I mean, I met Bob Husler, who is a legendary sports anchor for WFAN at the broadcasting school that I went to. He got me an internship, and then I got in and just kind of worked my way up. You learn how to cut tape, and you learn how to run the board, and you learn how to then produce. And then eventually I got a full-time job there producing and doing all the stuff behind the scenes, working with the guys that I grew up listening to, Steve Summers, Mike and the Mad Dog, all these guys. And then I got an on-air opportunity, and I knew that was always the goal. And it was a long road. It's just not, hey, you get an opportunity and then boom, you're a full-time talk show host. No, it took me a long time. First show I think I ever did on air was, I want to say 2006. So it would be 3 years after my internship. And I didn't get full-time on the air until November of 2021. So You do the math. It's a long time. And, I left the Fan. I came back to the Fan. I ended up doing some TV at SNY, and I'm still doing that. I've been there for 12 years, so I love that as well. I left Fan to go to WOR radio and then came back again. So there's been some comings and goings, and it's been a long, winding road, but ultimately very happy with where it led to, which was the ultimate goal, always being full-time at WFAN. But started as an intern and basically worked my way up and have been trying to become on the air ever since, and fortunate to be able to have that opportunity.
What prompted your rise? How'd you go up from producer now to being on air?
Well, it's a great question. So I told you about the on-air work behind the scenes, or the work behind the scenes, and then I was doing some on-air work at a part-time basis, and then I started working on, the Mike and the Mad Dog show, and Mike would give me an opportunity after Dog left to do some stuff on air with him because he always believed in me, and I think that gave me some exposure, which helped me after I left WFAN. That helped me get on air at SNY, and I went from being a full-time board op slash producer at the Fan to being a part-time on-air person at SNY. And then I got back into radio. I did some shows in Florida from my home, but I did some shows in Florida on the weekends, tried to get better doing radio. Then I ended up getting an opportunity to go back to WFAN. So then I started doing a little radio part-time, filling in along with SNY. Then I left WFAN to go do part-time radio at WOR when they became the home of the Mets. I was doing sports talk shows on OR. So this whole time I'm doing part-time shows, but I'm getting better at becoming a talk show host, also doing the TV stuff as well. So, and then I came back to WFAN knowing that at some point, some of the legendary guys, Tony Page, Steve Summers, Francesa, Benigno, whoever, at some point these guys may retire and maybe they'd be an opportunity for a full-time job or for more regular work. And that's kind of exactly what happened. I came back, I think like a year before Tony Page retired, and then that led to more consistent part-time shifts. And then after that, Mike left and Benigno left and Summers ended up leaving, and all these guys leaving created some new opportunities for for younger people at the radio station. And I was fortunate enough to be able to get one of those. So it's a long road of doing fill-in shows and doing overnights and weekends and different opportunities at different radio stations, and then just being in the right spot, right time to where something opens up. You hope that you can get an opportunity, and I did, and here we are.
How do you manage doing overnight radio?
You just have to, you have to figure out a way. I'm still trying to learn to manage it, but you have to figure out a way to balance your schedule and your time, and it's very difficult. It's not just that, it's also I have the other job with SNY, so I still do both. And, then, my wife and I just had a baby, 11 months old, so you're managing that as well. The shows themselves could be challenging just because it's the middle of the night, and sometimes, especially when there's no sports going on, which thankfully right now we don't have that problem anymore with the baseball lockout ending, but it could be challenging, 5 hours by yourself, limited calls, limited sports topics, and you're talking about the energy on the overnight. But I just think that A, you have to love what you do. B, you have to figure out a way to get proper rest and sleep, whether it's naps, whether it's just, 6 hours straight and, eating right, keeping your energy up, all things like that to be able to function at 3 in the morning, where you're in the middle of a show and maybe you've already rehashed all the topics that you wanted to hit that night and you got to come up with something. So it's still a challenge for me. It's something that I'm still learning. I've been trying to learn since last April, coming up on a year that I was doing the overnights 5 nights a week. I wasn't full-time until November, but I took over doing the overnight schedule since last April. So, and it's not something I've mastered yet. And from a lot of the callers who are regular overnight workers themselves, that's why they listen and call on the overnight, from their advice, what they seem to say is you never master the overnight schedule, but I want to make it different. I want to dominate the schedule as opposed to having it dominate me. In the beginning, I was getting dominated. Now I'm trying to find my rhythm here, and I think right now we're at least on a level playing field, and hopefully one day soon I can start to dominate the overnight schedule, but it is a challenge for sure.
Sal, before we finish up today, last question. How did you react to Greg Giannatti prank calling your show?
Well, I didn't know it was him at first, obviously. So it was funny when I found out that it was him, and I forget the details of it. But, I'm in the middle of a show, in the middle of the overnight or toward the end of the show, maybe tired and looking forward to the end of the show so I could go get some sleep. So it wasn't like I was as sharp maybe as I could be, but I had no idea. Giannatti with the voices, he's very good at changing it up a little bit. So I just thought it was a regular crazy overnight caller. And then I found out afterward that it was him, which was obviously pretty funny. But at the time I had no idea. So I was just treating him like I would any other caller. I'm sure he could get me again, by the way, because you're not even there are people, John, there are people that call that I know and that I'm friends with. They'll call the show expecting me to know who they are, whatever it could be. Joe in New Haven or Boston. And I'm like, okay, Joe in Boston. I have no idea that it's the best friend that I grew up with. Or so you don't. You're just in a zone. And I'm not thinking of real life, or I'm not thinking I'm getting pranked. I'm thinking of just getting through a talk show and doing the talk show. So you're in the moment like that. It's very easy to be fooled. And I had no idea that it was Gio.
Well, Sal, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate the time and best wishes for the overnight shift at WFAN and at Sportsnet New York. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it as well. Thanks for having me, and best of luck with your career as well.